Bigfoot, Dogman, Jersey Devil, and others. Are they real? Figments of our imagination? Or the most cleverly disregarded reality of all time? Come into the cabin. Let's sit down and find out together. Hey guys, welcome back to the cabin. I'm Robbie.
I'm Norman.
I'll be Johnny again.
He's Johnny again.
Ooh, he's starting to find his identity.
Yep. He's going to be Johnny 5 before it's over with. Number Johnny 5.
Uh-huh.
Oh, come on, Johnny.
That was one of those crappy Hanna-Barbera cartoons.
No, it was not.
What was it?
Short Circuit. Oh my God, Norm, he's not watched
80s
Short Circuit.
robot movie.
There you
Yes.
go.
Okay.
Johnny 5 alive.
Okay.
Maybe we ought to go back to Johnny Bravo.
Yeah, we'll go back
There
to
we
Johnny
go.
Bravo.
Johnny Bravo. He's Johnny Bravo. Hey,
Uh-huh.
hey, boy. Uh-huh.
I can do a bad Elvis impression.
Oh, always a fun time in the cabin.
Might be safer.
All right, what we got tonight, Norm?
Hi, this is a subject that seems to be warm and dear to Johnny's heart. Someone did a little research on it, pulled it out, and so I'm going to start part of the intro on it so he can start doing his fabulous excerpts into it.
In other words, getting on his soapbox
Right.
or his tangent.
Definitely. And start throwing in his theories. It's the Tenneesee Wild Man.
Ooh.
Yeah. Hi. The origins of Tenneesee Wild Man goes back to the 1800s in McNairy County, Tennessee. One of the stories is that a circus freak showman somehow captured the beast and put him on display in a cage to where everyone could see him for exploitation until it finally broke free. The description of the Tenneesee Wild Man is much similar to the appearance of a Sasquatch, but only more human. He supposedly had dark gray hair or dark ginger hair, is about 7 feet tall, and is always accompanied by red eyes. It is known to spout a disturbing war cry that can frighten anyone that hears it and has a horrible smell that is reminiscent to the skunk ape. It's very aggressive in behavior and could possibly be the arch enemy of the Sasquatch iconically, often fighting for territory reasons. Not surprisingly, the wild man possesses great strength, agility, and speed. There have been many groups of men that have went out hunting for the creature, but all the times usually they don't find anything or something traumatizing happens. The monster is known to have a strange targeting obsession with dogs and women. Many women come out to say that the wild man has attempted to snatch them up and carry them away. It's suspected, however, that these attempts were always unsuccessful. The latest known wild man sighting took place 20 years ago near Elizabethton, Tennessee. Rob Phillips, along with his cousin, were on a night hike to Bee Cliffs. Through the rain, they noticed something strange in the forest. Everything had become completely silent. The sound of a snapping twig broke the silence, followed by a horrible, inhuman scream, unlike the hikers had ever heard. The men fled separately through the darkened wood, with Phillips soon finding safety behind a tree. It wasn't long after that he spotted the wild man clinging to a nearby tree about 15 feet away. Rob heard his cousin break for the hill and followed suit. Phillips' account corresponds slightly with the initial tales of Tenneesee Wild Man. He was described as stout, about 9 feet tall, red eyes, beady eyes, and a set of claws, and a horrible, pervasive stink that Phillips compared to the stench of a dead animal. It's unlikely that Tenneesee Wild Man has lived almost 150 years in the Tennessee mountains. It's been assumed that more than one of these creatures exist, or could the creature sighting in the Bee Cliffs could be something else. It wasn't only Tennessee that the creature was sighted. Some reports also came from Kentucky. Now, also about this, is they go back to 1877. A party of gold miners traveling through the Globe Valley in Caldwell County, North Carolina, encountered what they described as a wild man Although they only got within 40 yards of the man, one miner claimed that this particular specimen of humanity appeared to be a giant, 6 foot 5 inches, with a funnel-shaped head and 2-inch long dark hair covering his body. Now that sounds like a Patterson gimlet almost.
Yeah, that sounds...
Bigfoot. When he spotted the miners, he pounded on his chest before turning and bounding off into the woods with the speed of a deer. The party tracked him with guns drawn to a cave deep in the mountains where they found bones of many animals scattered about, indicating that he had been living there for a while. And here's another thing. The most amazing thing about the story is, however, it was to the hundreds of other sightings and encounters and confrontations that supposedly took place across the United States following the Civil War. Newspapers and magazines carried their stories, reprinting those from faraway corners of the nation. The very strange reports and remarkable similar. In 1896, Forest and Stream published a sketch of the wild man of Chilhowee, a gruffle-type creature with talon-like fingers and toenails, tusks instead of teeth. Now that sounds like a gugway.
Mm-hmm.
Hair and a beard to his waist. 4 hunters encountered the naked man in the forests of East Tennessee and followed him back to his lair. They attempted to seize him and haul him back to Cleveland, but the man used his brute strength to overpower the men and run. A posse later returned for the wild man, captured him, and sent him to the insane asylum, where, according to reports, he now reposes in comfort. It's an interesting thing. They've got a picture here showing a creature.
That looks like a lot of artistic licensing going
Yeah,
on.
it's very yeah.
I mean, to me, I don't know how familiar you guys are with that movie Wrong Turn.
No, can't say I have seen it.
Okay, Johnny, you're familiar with it, though.
Ish.
Yeah. Basically, the inbred people, movies based in West Virginia, I believe, somewhere around that.
Not Pickens County.
Yeah, not Pickens County. But it's basically, you've heard all the old inbred stories, like, things start happening to people when, there's all that intermingling, stuff like that. So, but the movie starts off showing, like newspaper clippings and things like that, showing pictures of children that are products of being inbred, and then there's little clippings saying, freakish strength and all this kind of stuff, and cannibalistic tendencies and things like that. That's when I look at that picture that is on that page where you just ended up. That's what I see is one of those
Inbred.
Yeah, inbred things from
A genetic anomaly.
yeah.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's go on a little bit more if you want.
Well, the big takeaway I've got from this so far, seems like there's a lot of mixing up of different types, because like one part in you said it sounded like a gugway. Well, there's certain parts that sound like the Patty Gimlin. Other parts sound like maybe the Janoshka. It almost sounds like either there's more than one type of creature in this area,
That's what I'm thinking.
or people are just hearing
They've hung
other sightings.
They've hung one moniker on multiple things.
Yeah.
I agree.
Oh, we got the Tenneesee Wild Man, and it looks like this, and they're just describing, what they've heard of a gugway or a Patty Gimlin, or And I'm not saying that's what it is, but to me that sounds like that's too
is there because of the description, just the relative descriptions that we got just within this little bit that we talked about.
right.
I agree. I mean, it sounds like we've got 3 different type of creatures.
Yeah, and to me that's what's, because you can make the argument for at least 3 in just what you read so far, just 3 different types. When we did the show a couple weeks ago about the types of Bigfoot, and I mean, you go back and you read the different types. There's a lot of similarities to some of these creatures, but there's also differences.
Exactly.
But it sounds like The Tennessee Wild Man, if they're saying is one, is more like a mix of 3 or 4 different types than it is just its own separate. Because Johnny, your skunk ape's one of your
One of my favorites.
yeah, one of your favorites, one of your bread and butter. But as far as looks, is there anything kind of different? Is the smell of that one the
Other
only?
than the smell, it doesn't emulate anything like the skunk ape. I've never seen any history.
Because actually, that's I forgot that one because they said they.
Well, you know what the smell could be is, I don't know how rich Tennessee creeks are with sulfur in their water.
Well, and that's a possibility. But here's the thing: I would venture to say that they all have that same smell to varying degrees, depending on where they're at. What? Think about bears. Different bears survive on different types of diets.
Yeah.
So, you got some bears that are omnivores, some bears that are carnivores, some bears that tend to stick more to the nuts and berries type
Herbivores.
thing. Yeah. But all bears can eat meat.
Right.
So I haven't heard any stories about Gugway that said they're berry eaters. Those things are strictly carnivore. I mean, what does the name translate to? Face eater. I mean, I don't remember having faces on any of the vegetables that I've ever seen.
All your fur-bearing mammals have scent glands, generally at least on their rear haunches. Could be anal, could be down around their knees. But, yeah, I mean, if this thing was like just a feral human, the worst you're going to smell is feces and BO. Mm-hmm. Not.
So, I guess what I'm saying, or not saying, but I guess what I'm getting at is, I don't think smell is indignant of a particular type, other than maybe the skunk ape itself, because of its environment, maybe because of its diet, maybe because of a territorial thing. They're more territorial at different times with the scent gland type thing. Maybe that's why the smell is more prominent with those than it is with. Because I would just about bet you a paycheck that you go up to a Patty Gimlin, it's going to smell bad. You may not smell it as
Prevalent.
Yeah, as prominent as a skunk ape would be because of whatever the
Diet.
Well,
the diet, things like that would. You think about
Everything in a swamp smells extra.
Well, yeah, the
True.
water is different. It's going to be a lot different than in a Florida Everglade environment compared to a mountainous environment. The water may be clear. Is going to be clearer than in a swamp.
Yeah. And to answer your question about the sulfur, Tyler found it says 20% of groundwater in Tennessee has levels of sulfur in it. So I mean that's a possibility. I mean,
And a lot of Florida surface water has sulfur.
yeah.
So
I think we're looking at an environmental type thing that causes some of these things, because animals are going to evolve to adapt to whatever terrain. And this goes back to just like the discussions we've had about color, things like that. When Johnny and I saw the one we saw, we were 2 feet apart, but Johnny was looking at one angle, I was looking at another. He saw one color, I saw another color. We were looking at the same thing.
Right.
Because we were both looking in the exact same direction. But he saw one color, I saw the other. Okay. But the time of year that we were out there, you had multiple colored leaves out there. Mm-hmm. There was some orange and brown and different things like that. So depending on the way the light hit it, it's the way the color is. So depending on what is in the area that the animal is going to be eating at the time, like we talked about.
Adaptive camouflage, like we talked about.
But if this thing's, let's say this thing's a fish eater, because there's a lot of creeks in Tennessee. If it's a fish eater, if there's a lot of sulfur in the water, what's going to be in the fish meat? Sulfur. So same thing with the skunk ape in Florida. If it's eating, it may not eat fish, but it may eat what's eating the fish.
But it's got to drink.
By proxy, it's got to drink. But by proxy, it's going to have that in it. So, I just think it's the skunk ape because that's what people have called it. But I think there's more to it than it just, that's the one that smells. I'm sure they all smell. Because you got that much fur and you go around, you don't wash it.
I think it's a degree depending on environment that's going to determine the type of smell you get. I mean, it's like when up in our area where you smelled something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that smell was rotten meat, like a wet dog, and what was the other thing I described it as?
Wet meat.
Rotten meat, wet dog, and I think maybe like a feces type smell.
Yeah, I think it's what.
Or almost like hot garbage. That that
dumpster juice.
Yeah, nice. But so, do we need to jump up and say, "Oh, we got a skunk ape up there," or we just need to say that these creatures live out in the? Johnny, you've been a hunter all your life, like I have. I've never. Any deer that I've ever shot has never smelled good. I mean,
they smell like deer.
Yeah, but it's not like it's a pleasant smell. As far as it's not something you want.
Have you been gut shooting your deer, Robbie?
Maybe.
I do headshots only. My deer smells like blood, iron, and then their scent glands. I've never had an unpleasant. I like the smell of animals. I love the smell of a horse. I love the smell of a deer.
Yeah. Well, but a horse that's kept up inside, they're usually going to be kept up a little bit better than just
a free roaming horse does smell different than
Yeah.
an equine of someone's pet.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, calling it a skunk ape is obviously because this one has a more pungent smell than the other one. So, okay, that's how people...
They're just using a generalized
Yeah, it's a
term.
generalization, like you said. But, I tend to believe that this is a situation more than one. People have seen it. They call it the Tenneesee Wild Man, but have they just seen that one type, or have they seen different types? And it's generalization. Oh, that's the Tenneesee Wild Man. Just like I'm sure that there's Patty Gimlin down around where the skunk ape is at, but everything's a skunk ape down there. Mm-hmm. Or it's
definitely regional. The names are going to be regional.
So,
but the thing I found interesting was General Bragg of the Confederate. There's a base named after him.
Yep,
yonder.
Fort Bragg,
and he was quite the terrible general. But and Forrest pointed that out and said he'd kill him if he ever saw him in person. He got a lot of good Southern boys killed. But supposedly 5 of Bragg's troops went missing. And it was accredited to the Tenneesee Wild Man. But
that's interesting.
But the accounts don't really start till 1877, roughly 12 years after the war ended. And there's a lot of accounts of, well, not accounts, but rumors that the feral people up in that area, especially like in the Cades Cove area, they were actually deserters that just wanted to walk away from society and go back to very primitive ways. So I always found that interesting.
Yeah, and you do hear that feral people thing a lot when you get your proponents of that people were like, oh well, most all these Bigfoot are just feral people that live off the grid. I don't buy that. Maybe some of them, because we've got some Section 8 type people who live out on that hairy, ragged edge that don't want to be involved with society anymore. But are we given to believe that every single Bigfoot or Sasquatch sighting that we have is a feral person? No, absolutely not.
There is a thought, and I've been watching a few different documentaries on and off, especially podcasts, and I thought it was brought up by an observation by a park ranger out west. And he ran into the equivalent of feral people. And what he described them as was Neanderthal.
I think, actually, Dr. Meldrum, subscribes to that theory that, or he has recently come into that theory that
there may be some tribes
yeah,
still in existence.
and I don't think he thinks every single Bigfoot sighting is a Neanderthal, but I think he does believe that some of these can be that. I don't personally buy into that theory, and there again, this is my opinion. Just we've all got our own.
I'm just going to put it down as a possibility.
Yeah, and it is. It's a possibility. You're right.
Because of some of these humanoid faces that people see.
Well, and that's like Anthony has that. Anthony and my encounters are two totally different encounters
Right.
as far as what he saw versus what I saw. What I saw was an animal.
Right.
I mean, more of an ape-like face. But what Anthony describes as seeing is more of an aboriginal type face, looked a lot more human
Right.
than
That would
than
make
what
you
I
think
saw.
something like a
Yeah,
Neanderthal.
and that's what he said. Because Anthony's looking at this thing through a rifle scope, and he said that was why he couldn't pull the triggers and I've heard a lot of people that have had these things behind the scope said they couldn't pull the trigger because it looked too human.
Right.
Now,
I've heard that.
like I said, what I was looking at, you could tell intelligence in it because of how curious it was acting, but it was an animal. There is no way anything short of somebody coming up and showing a video camera over my shoulder from the 1980s of me watching that thing is going to change my mind as to what I saw and say, no, this was a feral person or this was a Neanderthal. No, this was a Patty Gimlin type. I mean, I say it's a Patty Gimlin type. It was dark. I couldn't really. It wasn't a
It was
Gugway.
a South Carolina booger.
It was a wood booger. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was that Patty Gimlin type.
Right.
Because that's
A traditional Bigfoot.
yeah. Because I didn't at the time. Obviously, I felt fear because I was 7, 8 years old, and I'm looking at this 10-foot thing standing outside looking at me through the door. Yeah, I was scared to death. But the question has been asked me several times, do you think it meant you any harm? And I said, no, I don't, because there wasn't nothing between me and him other than a little metal storm door. If that thing had wanted to come in and get me, it would have come in and got me.
If it was a Gugway, it might have been a different story.
Right. So I do believe there are different types. So that's why I say, or I will grant you that it's a possibility there could be some Neanderthals left over. I don't personally believe that, but anything's possible. That's what the basis of the show is.
Right.
It's what's really out there, and what's really out there could be just an animal that's an undiscovered species of.
This is a new theory that I would subscribe to a little bit about the possibility of Neanderthal.
Yeah, and there's some evidence out there to support that, but there's also evidence to support the other too. So,
Well, I'm saying that they go side by side. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that one's going to supersede the other.
oh, you're saying that it's not this or that. It could that you think that there could be both out there.
Yes, I agree
Okay.
that there may be
Yeah,
both out there.
I'll grant that. I mean that's a possibility because if we're going to say that there's different types, there's Gugway, there's skunk apes, there's Janoshka, there's Patty Gimlin. If we're going to say that there's all those types, we can't say that there's not.
And it's possible they may have learned to coexist.
Well,
Or not coexist. That some of them might even fight.
well, look at most of the legends of the First Nation tribes. Most of them, Shiantanka, that means big elder brother.
Right.
They
They got
coexisted
along.
with them.
Except for the red-haired giants of the
Yeah, that's
Southwest.
the Genoskwa. And those were like bigger, more ticked off versions of Gugway. They didn't
Yeah.
look like Gugway; they looked more like Patty Gimlin. But those are the ones that
They had the red fur. and they were
coated
aggressive.
their coated their fur with the stones from the river, so arrows would bounce off of them. And until the natives got the guns from white settlers, they were pretty much getting their tails kicked by these things that would come in and just wipe out a village. So when the natives started getting the repeating rifles in trades, they went back on the hunt for them. So, there's
The possibilities are endless.
yeah. Well, look at people. I mean, you got your sections of people who are just, the nicest things you ever meet in your world, but then you got certain people who are just,
Yeah.
you know what's. We're not going to say it on the show, but everybody knows what we're talking about. That is soon kill you is look at you.
Yeah. See, the reason I say Neanderthal is because the humanoid features that might make them consider them as a big brother too, besides maybe the PG version. But like I say, until it can be proven or, documented that it's one or the other or something else, it's open for speculation.
Yeah. No, I totally grant the fact that it could be any of that stuff. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah.
It's
good conversation material right now.
Right. Well, that's just like saying that, I've had people look at me and say, well, I believe in ghosts, but I don't believe in Bigfoot. How can you sit there and look at somebody and say, I believe in ghosts, but I don't believe ghosts could exist, but Bigfoot can't exist? I don't understand how you can make that leap in your brain to say that I believe that a floating apparition that is no longer alive exists, but a Bigfoot doesn't exist.
Takes all sorts.
Well,
but then the same thing.
Right, but you see what I'm saying? That to me, that makes as much sense to me as if I would to say to you, no, Norm, you're wrong. Bigfoot exists, but Neanderthals could not possibly exist. I have no basis to be able to say that couldn't happen. And if I'm sitting here telling you I believe in Bigfoot, I can't in good conscience say that I don't believe that there's a possibility that could happen. I don't think that it is, but that doesn't mean that I say, oh, it can't happen. I just don't think that is a possibility, or I don't think that they exist like that, but it's possible.
Right.
If all that makes any sense.
There was a thing that came out about a year ago up in British Columbia. This guy, he was an off-duty cop, and he observed something in a field that caught his eye. It was a young, naked human, little blonde-haired boy or girl, I can't remember. It was running around, and he stopped and he observed, and then it disappeared. He made a call. They came, they searched, they found nothing. The next day, he pulls off at the same place, same time. He sees it again. This time, he sees basically a Sasquatch come out, yank the kid up in a disciplinary kind of way, not like killing it, just yanking it up like Mama would back in the 70s before all this happiness. And they came in and they found there were 4 Sasquatches, a bunch of hybrids, and they were breeding with the human kids. And one detective that came back in on the job, he found this girl that was like 17. She'd been missing for 12 years. She was bred, and it had hybrids. And they favored the humans way more than they did the hairy dad.
And, I would submit that to you, Norm, is look at how many different versions of these stories or legends or whatever you want to call them have that. We just read it, or you just read it in here. So maybe not Neanderthal, maybe interbreeding between Sasquatch and human. Maybe what Anthony saw was something like that.
It could be.
Yeah. So, like you said, there's thousands of possibilities.
We don't until we have a live specimen or a dead body to perform testing on, especially at the DNA level.
Yeah. Well, and DA Anthony and I were talking about that a couple days ago, I think. And Anthony was talking about some DNA issues, and they said that, and I may be getting the order wrong, but it was like either the female DNA was mostly human and the male DNA was unknown, or vice versa. I can't remember which one. We were talking about 15.
Talking about Melba Ketchum stuff?
Yeah, I think that's
the mom was human and the dad was, the mitochondrial was human.
Okay, yeah. I knew there was some, and we were talking about 15 different things. We're trying to figure out show topics and things like that. And, that's the thing that came up. And So when you start looking at stuff like that, maybe that's what it is.
Like I say, we don't know, but it's a theory. Everything is a theory. And
Everything's a theory, though. And everything's speculation because there's no experts in this. We say it all the time.
the first thing someone might say is if a hybrid is Neanderthal, because that might be they won't think a hybrid between a human and a Bigfoot type creature right off the bat, unless the human parent is able to speak, tell us what's going on, if we can find them, because we don't know if the hybrid, is going to have any type of vocal skills for language. They may have it eventually, but not being around speaking.
Well, this is something that just popped in my head, just sitting here listening.
They'll have a skill of their tribe, but not modern language.
Think about something, and y'all may have thought about this, but think about a very popular character that I know the three of us grew up watching.
Well, one thing about Tasmanian Devil.
No, think of Tarzan.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't that he was born of that, but he was taken in by a group of
Apes.
raised by those apes, and that that was his behavior. He couldn't speak. He couldn't, obviously
He was feral.
Yeah, all the stories and legends are
taught
different as to how he was taught. I mean, you got Greystoke, Lord of the Apes with Christopher Lambert, however you want to pronounce it. You got Tarzan the Ape Man with Miles O'Keefe. You got the old ones with Johnny Weissmuller, who that Tarzan talked probably better English than any one of the three of us. Then you got the really old ones, and I can't remember.
There's some older than Johnny Weissmuller?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
The ones with Johnny Weissmuller were actually, some of those were actually in color. The one before that was completely
And
totally
when they
black
went color, they sucked. They were a lot better black and white.
Mm-hmm.
But Weissmuller all black and white.
And over in India, they have that the Legend of Mowgli.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Raised by wolves. So all this stuff. And I know this sounds like we're beating a dead horse. We say this all the time. But where do they get these stories from?
Truth, a little bit of light.
Something has happened. Somebody has seen something. I know people that are creative. D.A. is very creative when he comes up with his stories. George Lucas is very creative when he writes his books and comes up with his movies and things like that. There are creative people out there. But, and I know we use D.A. as an example a lot on the show, but, he bases a lot of his stuff on real world stories that he researches. So, what do we say? Life imitating art, or art imitating life. I mean, Tarzan didn't. Most of the story came out of who was it? Rudyard Kipling did Mowgli, but who was the one that did Tarzan?
I'm not sure.
Tyler, can you check on that? Who came up, or who wrote Tarzan originally?
There's a guy with three words in his name, three names.
Yeah.
Was it an English author?
Burroughs.
Yes, it was Burroughs.
Yeah, it's Burroughs.
Was it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway.
Edgar Burroughs.
Yeah, Edgar Rice Burroughs.
That's it, Rice.
I knew that, but I wasn't thinking that he actually, he's done a lot of stuff. He did
John Carter.
Yeah, John Carter, Carter of Mars. He did those. He did a lot of stuff. But when you talk about Edgar Rice Burroughs and you talk about Jules Verne and all those people,
H.G. Wells.
H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, all these.
Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Lovecraft.
Great guy.
Well, that's another story for another show.
It is, but it falls in line with what we're talking about. All these things
have something
that
a matter of truth
that these writers have based all this stuff on. I've got stories in my head of books that I want to write, but I didn't get those stories it's not like I just all of a sudden these stories just put. I was in situations that I'm like, I wonder what would happen if this happened.
You're still basing it off something.
Yeah. So I'm sure there are people out there who are so creative that they can come up with an entire story just completely and totally void of any kind of outside reference or thing at all. I'm sure there are people like that. But I think most people are in a situation where they see something and think, ooh, that would make a good story. So what would happen if this boy was, his parents died of malaria or whatever Tarzan's, whatever the original story came up as. I think his parents died of malaria.
That or natives kill them all, and
well, there's different stories. Like in Greystoke, his parents died from the apes actually came in and killed his parents. It never really got into the backstory in Tarzan the Ape Man with Miles O'Keefe. Some of the other stories, it was malaria. I think there was one, big cats killed him. It's just there's a ton of different stories on the legend as to how he came to live with the apes. But somebody saw something or was involved in something that said, ooh, I wonder how that would play out. That's so. And I know we kind of went down a rabbit hole and got off the Tenneesee Wild Man, but it's the same thing if you think about with the way the description that you just read out, Norm. People are seeing stuff. They're describing what they saw. Then somebody else sees something. They've already heard what somebody else said. So it's kind of like building a story on this. And this could very well just be a Patty Gimlin out there that they saw, or they saw a skunk ape, or they saw a gugway. And everything. It's just kind of morphed into what we've got right now.
Or they saw my ex-wife.
Yeah, that would be a Northwood scripted answer. But well, that was a good little rabbit hole, wasn't it?
yeah.
It goes deeper.
Yeah. And I think we just kind of stopped on a ledge.
I think it's a good place to stop so we can move on to our next project.
Yeah. Well, Norm, how can the people get in touch with us if they want to?
You can find us on Facebook at What's Really Out There. I monitor the site, Robbie monitors the site, and we have a few moderators and assistant admins that are content experts that monitor the site.
Yep. You can also email us at what'sreallyoutThere2022@gmail.com. Our YouTube channel is What's Really Out There. Tyler monitors that pretty well. If you send us a message on that, all our shows are uploaded to YouTube, with the exception of the first few episodes. Most every one we've got is on YouTube, and Norm usually shares those to the Facebook page too. We're on Spreaker, iHeart, Spotify, a few other more obscure podcast websites, but the main ones you can find us on are Spreaker, iHeart, Spotify, and YouTube. And we're talking about branching out, doing some other things. There might be maybe some live shows coming up. Maybe.
Couple months down the line, maybe.
We're working on it.
I have upgraded my tech. I'm no longer just doing smoke signals. I'm also accepting telegrams.
Oh,
You can send telegrams.
Ooh.
Telegram.
He'll be up to Morse code before it's over with.
Yeah.
Well, don't get too uppity.
Semaphore and signal flags.
Yeah, we're trying, Johnny. We're hoping.
Well, you will drag me into this.
Yeah. We'll get before it's over with. He'll have a walkie-talkie. I got him on that one, I think.
Might have to get him one for his birthday.
Them old kid walkie-talkies that's got the little Morse code thing on it, the alphabet on it. We'll be here and you'll hear.
Don't ruin my surprise.
All right, guys. Well, I guess that's all we got for this show. Norm, Johnny, I enjoyed it.
Always.
Y'all be safe.
All right. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye.
Bye.